people with real jobs.
Hello?
Self-employed people. Which do you want to be? This is Certifiably Unemployable. It's time to fire the boss and become self-employed. Maybe you need a push to get that business or side gig going that you've been dreaming about for years. And if you're an entrepreneur, you can listen to stories and get experience from people who've done it. Get ready to change your life. Broadcasting from the compound, this is Certifiably Unemployable, and this is Sean Dean.
Welcome to Certifiably Unemployable. I am your host, Sean Dean, and thank you for once again being a part of this week's show. So the topic of being a freelance artist, whether it be a writer, an actor, a singer, a musician, freelance is probably one of the most asked about topics when it comes to being self-employed, because in today's world, a lot of people have side gigs, a lot of people have side hustles, looking for a way to take their passion of that side hustle, that side gig, and moving it into something more full-time. And of course, here on Certifiably Unemployable, if you can be self-employed, fire that boss, we 100% want to help you with that, and we want to support you with that. So today's guests, we're going to be talking about starting your writing business, really not just about the writing business, but talking about the business aspect. So this really will apply to any freelance artist, in my opinion. So about our guest, Daniel Rosehill, he's a technology writer and reviewer currently based in Jerusalem. He's originally from Cork, Ireland. Daniel's professional history includes managing marketing communications at 2 quality startups, working at a PR company, and founding and selling a university news website. Daniel's technology interests includes backups and data recovery, Linux and open source, and cloud computing. Daniel also holds a master in political journalism from City University London and a bachelor's degree in law from University College Cork. He is currently the owner of a company that provides ghostwriting services. We're going to talk more about that. And he's also passionate about a few things: languages, exploring world cultures, cooking ethnic cuisines, and I find this very interesting, collecting national flags. I think that's cool, Daniel. I'd like to talk to you more about that one of these days. But
I think I gave you, I'm not sure exactly.
Yeah, but mostly
I'm not sure
he's
exactly
just a
what
passionate,
version of my bio I gave you, but that's a very interesting one.
Yeah. So he's passionate about learning. And Daniel, welcome to Certifiably Unemployable. You're currently located in Jerusalem, so we are way apart. And because of the power of technology and because of the power of the podcast, we've connected. And so thank you for joining us. Welcome.
Thank you very much for having me on the Sean show. That was a very interesting biography that I must have sent you beforehand about the flags.
Hey, no problem. So tell us a little bit about yourself. I know you're currently based in Jerusalem. You're originally from Ireland. So tell us a little background about Daniel so we understand who you are before we move forward.
Absolutely. So I've been living here in Jerusalem for the past 5 years approximately. As you said, I spent most of my life living in Ireland. I came to Israel for I guess kind of religious reasons. I've been on a couple of trips here. I'm obviously Jewish. I mean, there are relatively few people living here for any other reason. And I always just felt a bit out of place in Ireland. So I came here and sort of more with the mainstream. But now that I've joined the religious mainstream, I'm in the employment minority. But that's what I do. As you said, I am a freelance writer. I do a lot of writing for technology companies. I do some ghostwriting, which is more involved in writing books. But for the most part, I'm writing for tech clients, stuff like articles, ebooks, white papers. And yeah, that's basically my business. I've been running this full-time for just a little bit over 2 years and 3 months, give or take. And I was doing this as a side hustle for a few years before that. Actually, pretty much since I moved to Israel, I've been involved in freelancing in some way or another. I sort of fell into it, but we can get into that. But that's basically who I am and what I'm doing at the moment.
Well, that's awesome. Congratulations on being self-employed full-time, and making it past your first year, past your second year. That's awesome. So congratulations on that. So tell us a little bit about what the ghostwriting, why is it called ghostwriting? What exactly is that?
So basically, when I started freelancing, I was looking for jobs, and then I came across these, listings looking for freelance writers. And basically, I started writing for these technology companies, and not really, it wasn't exactly clear at the start where these blogs and articles I was doing were actually winding up on the internet. So I started searching for them and saw that they were being attributed to, the CEO and the CTO. So those were actually my first ghostwriting projects. I just discovered that I was ghostwriting after the fact. But that actually struck me as I really embraced it. And, as someone who I'm sort of kind of comfortable with being a behind the scenes person, doing the writing for people, doing the PR for people. And that's basically, it just became everything I did. I've started getting a little bit of credit recently for some websites I write on, but in general, 80 to 90% of the writing I do is for people that publish it under their own name. So we could be talking, as I said, I've worked on a couple of book projects, but that's the very tall end of things. On the more day-to-day level, it's doing a lot of things like articles, blogs, ebooks and white papers, as I said, speeches, basically whatever people in the technology world need in order to communicate. Those are the kind of projects that I get involved in.
That's awesome. I know as an entrepreneur, as somebody who's been self-employed for many, many, many years, I have had multiple times where putting together a website, doing different advertisements and having to write different things to represent my business. My idea is one thing, but putting it to paper and being able to write it is a total different ball of wax. And so I think a lot of entrepreneurs probably fit in that category. So I think it's phenomenal what you do. So that's great. So let's go ahead and talk about.
It's a good service.
Yeah, go ahead. I have to remember there's a little delay here.
No. Oh, sure. Yeah. No, it's fine. I mean, I guess I was saying, sure. The truth is, Sean, that even writers writing full time sometimes have difficulty with writing. It's just a skill that you develop. So if you're doing this full time for various people and that's what you do every single day, you sort of get into rhythms. And I think that's actually 80% of it. So don't be too hard on yourself. You just need to sometimes get a push and get started and be consistent, and you'll find yourself improving,
Yep, absolutely. I agree. So let's start breaking down on what it takes for somebody who has a side hustle, moves it over to a full-time business. So let's talk about some of the fundamentals. Let's start there. Where what would you think is the first thing a freelance artist, whether they're a writer, a musician, anybody who does stuff on the side, transitioning to full-time, what would be their first step?
The hardest thing I think that has taken me a long time to figure out. So firstly, all the difficulty in this is being, as you said, and I love that word, a small business owner, because that's firstly the mindset you need to transition into when you go from doing this on the side to doing this as a full-time gig. So it really is a full-time business. There's many, many, many aspects. I mean, sometimes freelance writing, you might think it's just someone, typing up a few articles. There's really a lot more to it than that. You have to do the kind of same things that much bigger organizations need to do. You're the only person doing it. So you are responsible for building a sales pipeline, for managing sales leads. You have to get some of them over the line if you want to stay in business. You have to make sure the people you're currently working with, you're doing a good job for them. You have to get your accounting in order. All those kind of things go into it. So that kind of happens in time, but you'll pick up those skills as you go along. But really, the hardest part of this for me has been figuring out pricing. And I think if you're new to this, just starting now, for example, because of Corona, it's so easy to get burned, not by other people, but by yourself, because you're not going to know exactly what to charge. And basically in terms of freelance writing is very specific. There's a few different pricing models. I've talked about those in a couple of blog posts and videos. But as you said, freelance artist, you could be doing gigs. You could be literally an artist painting, right? So I'm sure every niche has its own way to price things. But that's the biggest danger, is if you go out on your own and you don't have any mentorship, and that's something, if you can get, that's super valuable. But if you don't have that, then there's a real chance that you're going to actually shoot yourself in the foot by not knowing what to charge. And there are ways to get around that, but that's the hardest part to be prepared for.
Yeah, that's a good point, because one of the problems you face in every business is when you start, naturally you're hungry, you want work, you want to be busy, you want to build up the resume, you want to have a portfolio. However, when you price your rates too low, then raising them up later on can be a challenge. So you definitely want to think about that. Have you experienced that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's the writing market's an interesting one because you have different tiers. So you have at the kind of lower end, you have these things called content mills, which are just like these kind of SEO oriented websites. It'll just churn out tons and tons of work for clients. That's where a lot of people get their start. I did a very small amount of that the first year. But you're right, it is hard once you're in a certain level of the market, to be honest. Sometimes the only way to get to the next level is to just find new clients. But yeah, you can definitely undercharge yourself and just find yourself working way too many hours for the kind of income you're generating.
Okay, so now that we've talked a little bit about focusing on your price, your rate setting, what about client acquisition? I mean, what do you suggest? Where do you go to find clients as a freelance artist? What's your first step, do you think?
So I'll tell you the truth. I've tried just about every tactic under the sun, short of renting an airplane to fly a little banner. Which, if I ever get the budget, that's absolutely something I'm going to do.
Yeah.
Find like some trade show in San Francisco and bring your little plane right by it. I haven't done that yet, but what I have done is kind of the classic stuff. So I've done your cold prospecting, which I'm never very keen on, but I've done a bit of that. Something I'm doing right now for the first time really consistently is inbound marketing. So that's like I'm putting out my own blog posts, which is really ironic actually that this is the kind of work I help people with, and it's taken me the best part of 5 years to actually start doing it for myself. But that's something I enjoy a lot more because it's just more fun. I mean, if you could spend your time cold calling and cold emailing or putting out your own podcast, what are you going to choose? I think I'm sure you can tell me that being a podcast host is more fun, right? So I've done a mix, but really what's actually worked the most is finding a few good accounts and getting referrals to different accounts, and then this is a really important thing actually, is developing a good account. So if you have a good account in this game, freelance writing, it's worth its weight in goals. And if you can grow that account, or if it's a big business and you can get other people to give you work within the company, that to me is actually being much more time effective, because all it takes is one email. You're writing for person A and you write to person B in department B, hey, any chance you're looking for somebody? I write for Daniel, let's say. That for me has been much more time effective than the really, really hard work of putting together a pitch list, following up with people, getting on those phone calls. Realistically, only one out of 6 deals are going to come through. So that's what I found, is that really actually the personal relationships with a couple of really good targets and good accounts is much, much, much more effective and much more enjoyable than outbound. Inbound is something I'm just discovering, so I can't really say if it works or not yet, but it does work. I have gotten, somebody in China contacted me this week, which is like a big unknown first for me, and I was very excited. And that's only because I published something and it's good. So I think you have to cover all bases, but the thing I've had most success with really is growing accounts that you already have that you're doing good work for, and asking those people for referrals to their network.
Yeah, people underestimate the power of just asking for a referral, and a lot of people don't want to open their mouth and say anything and ask. But I'll tell you, if you're listening right now and you're just starting your business, even if your business has been around for years, go back to some of your clients that have been happy and just ask them for a referral. And you would be amazed how many people are willing to say, you know what, I do know a couple of people. And I know people ask me for referrals all the time, so there's nothing wrong with that. So that's a great point.
Yeah, I mean, I think the hard thing as well is, so if you refer me, if I were to ask you, Sean, can you refer me to someone, right? And then the referral doesn't come through, because this happens, right? A referral is not a guaranteed golden ticket. So I think I'm just thinking it's funny, because that's just brought to mind for me one situation where that did happen. And I've kind of been cautious to like go back to the person and say, this didn't work out, but I'm still interested,
Right.
And I guess you just have to kind of get over that kind of hesitancy, or I do. That's definitely held me back. So I'm not very, I'm definitely one of the people that need to hear this message. I'm not very aggressive. As he said, I can see the value in it, but I haven't always done it as well as I could have.
Well, and that's why we're here. We're here as entrepreneurs to help one another. So every little piece of advice is beneficial. So what about managing that client? Now that you've received the client and you've got the client, are there any tips that you want to give our listeners to manage that client and keep things organized? Certain software, anything like that?
Not so much in terms of software. I mean, I use a bunch of things, Slack, email, Asana, whatever. They all have their pros and cons. But one thing, yeah, I think the tip I would share is this. So, if you work in an office, you see your coworkers every day, right? So you share an office with them, you know a bit about their personal lives, you might go for drinks with them. Freelancers don't have that that kind of contact with people. So if you're working for a client who's not in your locality, they're in a different country, let's say, it's really easy to be forgotten about. And I think freelancers forget, and this is just the harsh way of the world. Freelancers forget how forgettable they are. So if you don't make yourself known, there's a very good chance that they're not going to remember to proactively give you more work, if you've gone quiet. So the thing I found is basically if you have a good account and things do go quiet, for example, there's no harm in writing an email, trying to get them on the phone. It's always a good idea to try get some kind of the more personal relation. So phone calls are great. Video chats are good. Like we're doing, it's a bit more intimate. But basically there's I heard an expression once that said that the only thing's more forgettable than a freelancer is yesterday's lunch in the office fridge. And that to me is very true, unfortunately, that if you don't have that day-to-day FaceTime with your clients, there's a good chance they're going to forget you exist. You might be one of 10 freelancers. So it's on you to basically to be proactive about reminding the client that you exist, you're looking for more work, you're enjoying the work, just give them feedback, ask for feedback, just do whatever you can to keep a relationship going.
Well, I think that's a very, very important topic that you brought up is staying in front of your client. And I think you and I both can agree with what's going on right now. If you're listening, during the pandemic of the COVID-19, you told me your country is still in lockdown. And so you're limited to certain things you can do. And so you look at, if you're a writer for a company and you've got an office full of people that you're sitting in desks next to them, you can go out and you can socialize, you can have drinks and things. Well, now a lot more people are working from home. And in reality, Daniel, I think you and I both can agree that a lot of businesses are going to move to that direction and stay there. They're going to stay working from home. They've realized that they don't need the office space. And so the reason why I'm bringing that up is I think us as entrepreneurs need to get creative. We need to think of different ways to connect with our team. And even if it is something as simple as having a little virtual hour here and there during the week to just hang out, build up that camaraderie, help each other with your imagination and your creativity. All of that is very helpful, especially with writers, musicians, people that are creative in nature. They need to have that interaction with people, I believe. So I know when this pandemic first started, I'm very involved in the theater. We've got a local theater group and we're so used to seeing each other all the time. My wife and I decided that we were going to do a weekly happy hour with our friends. We were all going to just kind of be on House Party or on Zoom, and we were just going to hang out and chat, and just have a couple of drinks virtually. And everybody loved it because we weren't able to really do anything other than that. So I think that's a good point. Thanks for bringing that up. Yep.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I spent quite a bit of time since the pandemic started doing Zoom drinks with people, but not in a professional context at all. So yeah, I mean, the funny thing is that we have all the technology required to do all the things you're talking about. So, we have our webcams, we have our cameras, Zoom is working perfectly. We're having this interaction. So that was all there before the pandemic, and it just wasn't really being used. So yeah, I mean, I think what you're saying is actually quite powerful, that at the moment, a lot of people are kind of looking at the pandemic as this short-term thing, right? We don't know if it's going to continue in 3 months or 6 months, but perhaps, people could embrace, it's almost a superpower to say I think this pandemic is going to be going for the long term. So how are we going to re-architect our work culture to reflect that? And maybe those kind of things, that the happy hours you're talking about, that's exactly the way the way to do it, you know?
Right. Well, and being an entrepreneur, one of the things we don't do is we don't wait for other people to make the decision for us. We make the decision for ourselves. And so you've got to make that adjustment, whether you're in a pandemic or you're just restricted because of budget or whatever the case may be. You have to adapt to your environment. So the next thing I wanted to talk to you about, Daniel, is I heard you mention using the example of an airplane with a banner in San Francisco. Naturally, you're not in San Francisco. You're not in the US. You're in Jerusalem. So with a business like yourself and a lot of other side hustles, I know when I hired the person to do the voice work for my podcast, I don't know him personally. I found him online. He could have been in another country. It didn't matter. So let's talk about the international aspect of your business and working internationally, why it's so important. Talk about that if you would.
Absolutely. So yeah, that's actually another thing I am actually really passionate about. So I've been doing since, I can't remember the first international client that I had here, but basically there's a real reluctance on the part of a lot of freelancers here to do business internationally. I think the people are just still very much focused on the local market, and obviously there is a strong technology market in Israel, but it's still a pretty small market at the end of the day.
Right.
So basically working internationally here is actually quite easy. The US tends to be a bit more strict in terms of compliance and regulatory stuff, essentially. But Israel is quite flexible. So once you're in the country for more than 180 days, give or take, you're a tax resident. But it doesn't matter where you make your income. You just have to be registered here, pay your taxes like you do in the US. So basically working internationally is very straightforward. There's a website I use called transferwise.com, which basically lets you set up it's a British company, set up a virtual bank account in the US. It's got those ACH details that, you guys use for transfers.
Right.
My wife's American, by the way. So I spent a bit of time there, but you're right. I'm not there much. You can have in the UK the same thing. You can have in Europe. So all the technology is here now, including Zoom and webcams and microphones, to do business internationally really easily. And you also mentioned a point there that's really important, that it is changing, because I've definitely, when you're doing business with Silicon Valley, there's a lot of overlap between Israel, and they're kind of used to that. But there is always a hesitancy, in working with someone in a different country, and you're kind of the strange foreigner and they don't really know what to ask you about, why are you there? And that's always hanging in the background. I would really like for the corona to take that away, because it's better for all of us. I have a friend doing work for a company in London based in Spain currently, and he's just doing his job remotely. So I would really hope that we can get past this kind of hesitancy, because I think technology people tend to be kind of more forward thinking, and they're kind of already used to the idea of distributed teams and people working remotely. But there is still quite a bit of resistance to it. The change is not going to happen overnight, but I think it will definitely, this current pandemic is going to accelerate things to a crazy extent, in terms of getting people used to this idea that, as you say, it doesn't really matter if your team member is located down the road or in Nigeria. They just have to be good at what they do and at a rate you can afford.
Right. And I think that's where some of these websites like Fiverr.com and some of these different websites that are available to anyone, I think are very, very important, because, and again, we bring up the whole example about asking people for referrals. You should also ask them for reviews, because someone like myself, who's over here in the United States, when I go to hire somebody to do something web-based or something that I know is digital aspect or just requires technology, especially when you're new in business, you might not have the budget to be able to hire the professional that I know right down the street, because he might require me to spend 30 grand, but you can find somebody internationally, because of the currency difference and everything else, that can do a great job, a fantastic job, and for much less in price. So So I think what it boils down to is, as an entrepreneur, especially if you're building a business internationally, and you can disagree with me or agree with me on this, you tell me your side of it. But I think more importantly, that's where you want to ask your clients to give you a review, tell them the experience, because that's where the level of being more comfortable doing international business is going to come into play. Wouldn't you agree?
I agree with you about the reviews, definitely, and that's again something I've been I think as well. A lot of writers tend to be in a more kind of introverted, introspective side of the Myers-Briggs scale.
Right.
So I probably put myself. I think I'm an I something or other on the scale, and I get the feeling you're more extroverted. That's your personality, right? So
right.
I have a little bit of I have a little bit of hesitancy in doing things like asking for reviews, but I would agree with you that it's very powerful, and everybody needs that social proof. I guess it becomes more important the more distributed the marketplace is. Regarding doing business internationally, so yeah, I think it's super great for people like us. At the same time, as a freelance writer, that same dynamic brings me a bit of pain, because we're constantly dealing with competition from people in much cheaper labor bases.
Yeah.
And that's putting a lot of pressure on rates. And this isn't something me in Israel, actually, a lot of American writers would tell you the same thing, that the stuff like Upwork, Fiverr, all these marketplaces have actually been very detrimental to rates that freelance writers can command. So
well, that's one thing. That's one thing I wondered about.
Good.
Yep.
Yeah, it's definitely good, but it is an enormous challenge, and it's creating a kind of hard expectation on clients. So you might perceive of me as sitting in an outsourcing geography, but actually my cost of living here is comparable to New York City, or London. It's really expensive, so I can't really offer those cheap rates. I mean, I can, and it'll just make my life difficult, and that's unfortunately in the freelance writing market often the case. The clients dictate the rates that they're going to pay. So
one thing
it's a double-edged sword.
Yeah. No, and I understand what you're saying about a double-edged sword. One of the things that I've noticed when I've been able to bring a new relationship, find somebody new on Fiverr or one of those outsourcing sites, is that it has more, for me, been more of an introductory, where I can get a taste of what this person can do. And because when I work with them more long-term, if I have, the prices have always gone up, because I've always, you get what you pay for. Bottom line, you get what you pay for in business. And so if you're looking for somebody that's going to especially write for you, and I've never hired a writer or something of that nature from one of those sites, because I've been concerned about the language barriers and things of that nature. So I want to make sure that what I'm paying for is going to be a quality representation of my business. So I agree with you 100% what you're saying there. So, I've got a buddy of mine. I think I told you about this when we first chatted on the phone. He lives here in the States. He's from England. He owns a book design company, and he does a lot of international business. And he 100% will agree with you that you have to just know how to communicate. You have to learn how to keep in contact with these customers internationally, because it's super important. So the last thing I wanted to chat with you about, Daniel, is getting into the small business owner mindset when you're doing a side hustle and you move over to owning your small business. What do you have to do? What's the first thing you got to do? Because I know there's a lot of people listening right now that are looking to get their business started. What advice can you give them?
I think so. This year has actually been a really good year for me so far, comparatively speaking, compared to last year. When I look at my financial report, so last year I actually made a kind of embarrassingly low. It was really a subsistence amount of money I made, and I think there was a few reasons for that. It was my first year doing it. I also had a couple of social things. I got married in the summer. We moved apartments.
Congratulations.
Repairs to apartments. I had a surgery. A lot of stuff went on in that year. Thank you. But actually this, so at the moment, to be honest, there's not a whole bunch of stuff to do. I told you about the lockdown. So, I could go out to buy a sandwich. I don't really have many options. I could go for a walk. And that's actually been incredibly powerful too. Basically, I wasn't working hard enough last year. And the beauty of the coronavirus is it's taken away all this distraction, and it's made me work kind of too hard. What I'm doing at the moment is not sustainable. But once I got into that fifth gear because of the virus and because of the fact that there was nothing else competing for my attention besides my business, suddenly I broke through those kind of barriers. And I'm not rolling in the big bucks by any stretch of the imagination, but I've got past that. I cover enough to pay my rent and to go out for dinner, and that's basically it. I'm out of that really, really tight pressure zone. So basically what did it for me was purely the pandemic, and the pandemic just basically said, look, if you need to work 60 hours this week for a few weeks to really get things going and to create pipeline for yourself, do it. There's nothing else to do. You can do those Zoom drinks we talked about, and that's pretty much it. You've got your home office, you've got your computers, just go make it happen. There's no excuses anymore. So that for me has been the thing. And it took me a year to actually get into that kind of gear. And I didn't need a pandemic I needed a pandemic, but people shouldn't. You're basically be prepared to work really, really hard for the first few years to get it going. I don't know if I'm going to do this long term right now. I can't say that for sure, but I have in the last few months got into a place where I can kind of see, at least for another year, let's say, that this has legs to keep going.
Wow. Great advice. A lot of times people just need to give themselves permission to work harder. And as an entrepreneur, you have to take advantage of the time that you have to build the business, because the last thing you want to do is to look at yourself in the mirror and say, well, it didn't work. I'm going to have to go find a job now. Right. And so, because number one, you don't want to do that. But number two, that option might not even be there. So great point. I'm glad you brought that up.
Exactly.
Yep.
No, exactly. And that's actually another really powerful thing about the pandemic is that, as you say, it's almost like we're on I don't know what the expression is, we're on a cliff edge, right? We've taken this leap, and there isn't that kind of, there's no safety net at the moment. There's no safety net of employment. I think it would be really difficult to go looking for a job right now. So it's kind of, we have no choice but to make this work, which is both stressful and powerful in terms of a motivator at the same time.
Yep. One of my
the other thing, Sean, I wanted to add one thing before I forget about it. One other big shift that I did the last few months was to stop feeling sorry for yourself for working really hard. To stop feeling like you deserve great things because you're working crazy hours. That's kind of a transition I made a few months ago. If you start thinking it's normal to work really hard to try and make this work, you stop feeling bad for yourself. I think I felt for a while almost victimized, not victim, that sounds bad, but kind of sorry for myself that I was putting in these crazy hours and just getting by. And if you just kind of expect that's kind of par for the course, that makes it so much easier to deal with, in my experience.
Right. Well, it's one thing working hard for yourself, and then there's one thing working hard for somebody else. So you should never feel bad for that. When I was 18 years old, I heard a quote by Les Brown that has resonated with me and has stood out with me for years. And Les Brown said, you have to be willing to do the things today others won't do in order to have the things tomorrow others won't have. And as entrepreneurs, you have to be willing to do it. You just have to be. You can't say, well, I'll do it tomorrow. Well, guess what? The result is going to be the same it was yesterday if you wait till tomorrow, right? So speaking of that, what kind of professional development and what kind of other professional things do you do on a daily basis, weekly basis, that helps you with your mindset and with your business?
None. No, I haven't really. I definitely have neglected that a bit to date, but I am actually currently working on a certification just for technology, something in cloud computing, and that's the first thing I've done. And actually, it's been really, it's been really good, because I kind of feel it's the first time since I left university, over 10 years ago, that I'm in a sort of constructive course, working towards achieving something. And that's it gives a nice balance from just being at the grindstone all the time. You're still putting in effort towards growing your business, but it's very hard to just sit behind a computer for 40, 50 hours a week, just churning out emails and work, whatever. So yeah, that's the first thing I've done. I wouldn't say it's in the mindset space. It's a certification, but it's something that this is a really interesting thing in freelancing is trying to figure out how can I make this a career? How is it not going to be me doing the same thing month after month and sending out my invoices, getting paid? And to be honest, I'm still thinking about the answer to that question. But I think things like doing professional development, as you said, is really, really easy to neglect.
Yeah.
But it's something that needs to be in your toolbox. And as I said, I've just started. I'm going to do this one. I might do the HubSpot ones after this. But yeah, you should. Basically, my kind of gut feeling about the freelance market writing place, ton of people coming in right now. If you're just a generalist, probably not a great time to be coming into it. It's already a hard market. Now there's a ton of people coming in. The exception is if you can do something really niche, really expertise, and you've got a certification to back that up. That's where I can see people if they are interested in transitioning into this kind of work I'm doing, where they can succeed.
Right. Well, so there's a couple of things about what you just said. Number one, professional development is more than just hearing motivational messages and Les Brown, Zig Ziglar, Tony Robbins things. Being that you're doing these certifications and continuing your education, because as an entrepreneur, we always are learning. Every day we're learning new things. And so sharpening your axe, building your skill set is going to continue to allow you to excel, whether it be on the motivational, hey, I'm doing great kind of thing, or just the fact that your skill set's doing better. So I think, so I don't want you to forget about that, because that is huge, what you're doing there. The other side of that I wanted to mention is there was another point that I wanted to bring up that you had talked about. Oh, being able to support one another, being able to be a freelance writer. I believe building these small networks, whether it be on Facebook or WhatsApp or Telegram, something to where you as writers or as freelancers can support one another, because at the end of the day, everybody needs a support system, right?
Yep.
You've got a new wife, you've got family, that's fantastic, but not everybody has that. And so with that being said, if somebody's looking for some support, if somebody's looking for a little advice, how can they get a hold of you, Daniel? Because I want to be able to get you connected with like-minded people if need.
Sure. Yeah, that's very powerful. And actually, I think, to be honest, you can't rely. I certainly do rely on my, my wife for emotional support, but you need the professional support. It's a different kettle of fish. And my wife's an architect. She doesn't know the details of what I do and the industry. So yeah, you need both if you don't have that in your local community. So I actually want to recommend, there's a freelance writers subreddit that I found surprisingly good. I haven't really explored Reddit so much, but if you just Google freelance writers Reddit, there's a ton of Facebook groups. My issue with a lot of these Facebook groups is that they're very, oftentimes it's somebody trying to sell something or sell everybody on their methodology.
Yep.
There is an awful lot of those. And the beauty of Reddit is that I have a public account, but a lot of people are usernames, so they can talk completely honestly about what they're going through. And that anonymity can be a really bad thing in terms of trolling and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But it can also be very powerful because people can actually have real talk online. So firstly, I really recommend the freelance writer subreddit. And if you want to get a hold of me, sure, my website is dsrghostwriting.com, or you can just Google my name. I think there's only one other person by my name in the world. So
all right, fantastic. Is there anything else that you wanted to add in before we wrap up today's episode? Because we've talked about a lot of good things, and I appreciate it very much.
No, I appreciate it. I agree. I think it's been a very worthwhile conversation, and I don't think I have anything to add to it, actually.
All right, perfect. So if you're looking to reach out to Daniel, you can visit his website. I'll make sure that I put a link to his website on the podcast here. Don't forget, if you're listening to us, watching us on YouTube, make a comment. Watching us on Facebook, make a comment. If you have any questions, you can comment on the video, comment even by emailing us at certifiablyunemployable@gmail.com. I can connect you and Daniel together as well. I hope to get Daniel on again in the future. And everybody that I've spoken to that has been to Israel has said how wonderful it is. So hopefully one day my path will bring me to Israel and you and I can get together, have dinner, have a drink, and that'd be great.
Sure. I'd also like to see Florida again, so let's try and make it happen in the future.
There you go. Mickey Mouse is calling your name, buddy. All right. Well, we appreciate you being a part of Certifiably Unemployable, Daniel. So don't forget to leave your comments, like, subscribe. You don't want to miss an episode. Until next time.
You've been listening to Certifiably Unemployable. Ready to fire the boss yet? You're on your way. Sean has been self-employed for over 20 years. So if that's something that you want to do, something you've been dreaming about for years, Sean has all the knowledge, good, bad, and indifferent. We hope you've gotten some useful and practical information from this show. And we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hook up with us on Facebook and Instagram at Certifiably Unemployable. Find us on YouTube and at www.certifiablyunemployable.com. Till next time, this is Certifiably Unemployable, signing off.